The best motorcycle security is the security you actually use. Goodbye. I'm glad you're still here because in this video I'm going to show you the security that I trust after 7 years of testing locks, chains, trackers and alarms. It's going to be a long one, but I've broken it all up into chapters and it might help stop your bike being stolen. Invest in decent kit and it could last a lifetime. And while nothing will stop the most determined and time-consuming criminal attacks, locking your bike up does make it significantly less likely to be stolen. And if nothing else, it means the bike you park next to with no locks is far more likely to be pinched than yours. You probably saw the paid promotion label come up, and that's because this video is sponsored by Calimoto, but I'll tell you about that later. What's important is that I don't have any affiliate links to any of the products I'm going to recommend, and I haven't been paid or in any way sponsored by any of the brands I'll mention. And of course, we don't sell any of them. So let's get cracking, as I want to cover as much as I can to help you buy what's best for you. Now we'll look at portable security first, but keep in mind that a lot of what we cover will also be really useful at home, especially some of the angle grinder resistant D-locks. And yes, we'll be discussing diamond cutting discs too. And the Met Police campaign of lock, chain, cover is totally right. The more security you use, the better. 2 locks are always more hassle for a thief to defeat than 1. So if your budget is low, you could still get a pair of cheaper locks rather than one expensive one. The Met suggests a disc lock on the front, which stops the bike being pushed away, a chain on the back, which stops it being lifted into a van, and a cover over the bike because it's not immediately obvious what bike or security is under there. Now, some important things to note when parking up though. Try to park your bike in a well-lit area where there are plenty of people. That's not to say it will stop the most brazen thieves, but it will help. Don't leave your security outside when you're not using it. Chains have been known to be cut under the sleeve when not in use, then the links zip tied back together and the cover put back on. When your bike's there, it's quick, easy and silent to snip the tie. And also, locks can be scuppered, for instance by jamming up the keyway. If you left your lock out and arrived to find it unusable, do not leave your bike there, as there's a chance the thieves are waiting for you to park up and be forced to use no security. When buying anything, look for Thatcham accreditation in electronic devices and Sold Secure motorcycle, or powered cycle as it's now called, gold or ideally diamond on hard security. With Sold Secure, only diamond certified locks have been tested to withstand an angle grinder attack. However, there is some good kit out there that hasn't been certified by these two companies, and we'll cover some of it here. If you've ever got a question about security, you can always join our Bike Social Facebook group, as I and the rest of the team are there, as well as industry experts and thousands of other riders. And of course, please do check the huge library of security products I've tested at Bike Social in the reviews section. And finally, don't get too paranoid or scared to ride. Nothing is undefeatable, and there are extremes, but the typical attack is brute force and angle grinders. I use a lot of kit like 42-inch bolt croppers, drills, pry bars and others in testing, and I'll never reveal it all, but any security is always better than none. And it does make a difference. Yep, there are cordless 22mm croppers, but they're designed for rebar, not hardened steel. There's hydraulic too, but their capacity tends to be limited. But you could also argue for oxyacetylene, thermite, nuclear. Please don't use the rare and unlikely extremes as an excuse not to lock your bike. Oh, and lock picking is pretty much irrelevant in motorcycle theft. Locks are tested, Sold Secure as part of the Master Locksmiths Association, but there's no evidence of it being any kind of real problem in motorcycle theft, even with the specialist tools that are promoted for sale by some YouTubers. The typical thief is not a highly practiced lock picker. Bike thefts dropped over the last few years, but they are creeping up again, so please lock it. And it says well that in this video you'll see footage of me using a mains grinder and a battery grinder. I use the mains one to ensure consistency in testing, as it's about comparing all of the locks I test, not giving a definitive time to defeat. However, I do also use an up-to-date DeWalt grinder and have benchmarked this against the mains. The most basic security and the one thing that all motorcycles and scooters come with, but sadly it's really easy to defeat. Thieves can snap many steering locks thanks to the leverage the bars give them. Some are stronger than others, but generally they can be pretty easily and quickly defeated if someone wants to. If you don't have any other security, then of course use the steering lock, but there's a lot more you can do quite cheaply and easily to make your bike far less likely to be pinched. I have tested one disc lock that I was able to pry open with a spoon, but generally the weakest point is the disc itself, which can be quickly cut with an angle grinder. You can see one here on this stand I made to take to shows. But thieves will often be using hammers and even rocks, so as long as your disc lock is of decent quality, it really can make a big difference. You could use a padlock, but decent quality ones might not reach over the disc. Oh, and keep in mind that scooter discs are often a lot harder to attach a lock to. So many scooter disc locks have a smaller pin that can pass through the vent holes rather than over the whole disc. If well designed, they're fine, but they can be easier to break in some cases. Most scooters have storage space, so I'd use something bigger like a D-lock or a chain on them. Anyway, the £45 round lock from Pragmasis is a great option as it's practically impossible to defeat due to the way it's designed. So though the disc is the weak point, this can also be used to secure a chain. Pragmasis actually offers it to suit 13mm and 90mm chains, so it can be used at home and out and about. Other disc locks I'd suggest are things like the £55 Squire Eiger Mini, which can be cut more easily than the round lock, but is handy for attaching a chain at the same time to prevent the bike being lifted. Now the Abus Granite Power XS67 is good too, but it's a bit overpriced at around 60 to 70 quid. However, it's also part of some bundles, including the BikeTrac grab bag and chain, but we'll come back to that. Alarmed disc locks can be great. The Abus Detecto X Plus 8077 is loud and effective, but it's £150 and tricky to use with a chain, so not as versatile as kit like some of the other alarmed locks out there. The Magnum Plus Titan alarm disc lock from Halfords did well in my testing, but that won't work with a chain, and the same goes for the Kovix KAL 14, good but limited, and there's a Xena there. Now I haven't tested any, but Oxford Products has quite a good range of alarmed locks that are mini shackles, so will work with a chain too, and you'll find them in most bike shops. And when I say mini shackle, that's one there. Remember, a disc lock alone won't stop your bike being picked up and put in a van, but the most common theft is it being pushed away and usually hidden for a while, often chained up under a cover where they leave it to check for a tracker. And don't forget to take your disc lock off before riding away. We've all done it, but it can be an expensive mistake. Find a way to remind yourself, like with one of these stretchy cables that you put on the lock and on your handlebar. This brings me neatly to what I think is the best motorcycle disc lock on the market, Road Lock. Now this isn't Sold Secure rated, it hasn't been put through, it's actually an American company, but in my testing it was very resistant to attack, much better than I thought it would be, even with a small pin. And because it locks the wheels solid, you'll stall before riding off. The design means that it's very hard to defeat as you can't get at the disc to cut it. You first have to unbolt it to be able to do that, and that's more hassle. If you cut the body of the lock, it stays attached, and smashing hell out of it with a hammer doesn't work either. This is the most effective disc lock I've ever tested, so as long as you have radial calipers on your bike, you should be able to fit it, and it's always ready to go. Disadvantages? Well, it takes some setting up when you first fit it, and you might have to pull on the bars to release it, but for me, it's well worth it. You need to keep the lock lubricated too, but I've had this one over a year now and I've ridden off-road a bit with it as well, so it's getting crap thrown in there. The other week I took the barrel out, cleaned it up and lubricated it with graphite powder. Don't lubricate any locks with WD-40. It costs £210, is available in black, red or gold and suits most European and Japanese bikes with radial calipers. All you need to carry around is the locking pin, but you can tuck it under the seat, or I designed a 3D printed carrier for it, which you can download for free at the link in the description if you want. Now with this, or any of the locks I'll be talking about here, if you want to know more before buying them, or you'd like to see the others I've tested, visit bikesocial.co.uk and head to the product reviews section. Right, a D-lock or U-lock, depending how you hold it, can be pretty versatile as it can go through the wheel or better still, over it. And you can often attach a chain to it too. Having a D-lock that goes over the wheel is better as it's less likely to have enough play to open up and slip over after one cut. If it's over one car spoke, there might be enough play in the shackle to take it off without a time-consuming second cut. Oh, and make sure that the shackle locks at both sides, and I also wouldn't use it over traditional spokes. Definitely buy one that will fit over the wheel for that. You typically look for a D-lock with the minimum amount of free space inside to reduce the chance of a mini bottle jack being used to split it. And Pragmasis does offer different size shackles for its DIB D-locks. But an angle grinder is the most likely attack. And D-locks have come a very long way in the last few years. Hiplok was the first out with an angle grinder resistant D-lock with the £250 D1000. It was originally designed more for push bikes, so the shackle's a little small, but it of course fits over car spokes. And I found that by taking the silicone sleeve off, it passed through the hub of a lot of BMWs. And this one took 5 abrasive discs to remove from the wheel. Yeah, the cast spokes could be cut, but on bikes with twin brake discs, it's rarely possible to get the grinder in to cut them. Now my D1000's looking well loved, as I took the sleeve off it to fit it through a BMW hub, and I painted it as I wish these brands would sell them in brighter colours to warn thieves off and to remind us we put them on. Then Litelok came out with the £150 X1 and the £250 X3. Now the X1's great, and I know some people use 2 of them, which is a brilliant idea, but the Hiplok is more resistant to an angle grinder attack. The X3 though was the most resistant to an abrasive disc angle grinder attack, though when you're looking at the difference between needing 5 cutting discs and 8, it's kind of getting academic. The X3 has an excellent alloy cylinder, and both it and the X1 have larger shackles than the Hiplok D1000, so fit over some front wheels, as well as through the hub of many BMWs without modification. But then came the £300 Hiplok DX1000, which had a bigger shackle, so it would fit over all the front wheels I tried it on, including the VFR 800, which has ridges cast into the rim, and even some back wheels. Do measure before you buy one if you intend to put it on the back wheel though, because that can be very tight, and with a fresh tyre, sometimes you might not get it on. Oh, yeah, this colour. This was a test moulding that Hiplok did during development of the DX1000, and I managed to nab it from them. It's not available at the moment, but if you think they should offer brightly coloured lock bodies like this, then let me know in the comments below, and maybe it'll become an option. This took 6 abrasive discs to get it off the Triumph Tiger wheel I used for testing, which is fewer than the Litelok X3, but the Hiplok DX1000 is more resistant to attack using a steel diamond cutting disc. Now we'll talk about that more in a bit. Then came the £270 Abus Granite Super Extreme 2500. Now this one has the best latching mechanism. It's very smooth and easy to use and silent. The Hiplok can rattle a little bit, which doesn't bother me as you can't hear it strapped to a motorcycle or in the luggage. Maybe if you carried it loose on a push bike, it might be noticeable. That's it. The Litelok can get quite stiff and need a bit of a jiggle to remove, so the Abus mechanism here does have the edge. It's got a good size shackle though, still beaten by the Hiplok DX1000, but it's possible to release with 4 abrasive cutting discs. Still a lot, and more than enough to beat most thieves, but not up there with the best. It's also not as good against the diamond disc. Now all of these locks were tested for far more than I can show here, including cutting the bodies, drilling them and more. Check out the full reviews in the products review section of bikesocial.co.uk. So if you're going to buy a D-lock, and I'd recommend you do as they're so versatile as long as you have some way to carry it, I'd say investing in an angle grinder resistant one is money very well spent. But which one is the best? They're all very good, but based on versatility and resistance to all forms of attack, I'd say the Litelok X1, then the Hiplok D1000, then the Abus Granite Super Extreme 2500, then the Litelok X3, with the Hiplok DX1000 being the best motorcycle D-lock thanks to its size and the overall combined resistance to abrasive and diamond disc attacks. I just want to add that I'll be testing the new Skunk Lock Carbon angle grinder resistant D-lock soon, but it didn't get here in time for this video, so keep an eye out on the Bike Social product reviews for that. To stop your bike being lifted into a van, you need to tether it to something. Now I've spoken to people who even carry a 22mm chain on their bike. That's this big, but that's too much to put in a top box, so you'd need to strap it to the seat. For most of us, a 13mm chain is about the limit of what you'd likely be able to carry. And by the way, never put it on yourself. Don't put it in your rucksack. If for some reason you have to put it in a rucksack, you must have a back protector on. Now, these sizes of chains will be less resistant to an angle grinder attack than what we've just covered. And under 13mm, they can sometimes be cut with heavy-duty bolt croppers. Keep chains off the ground if you can. While it's a very unlikely attack, if the chain's trailing, it's more easy to break with a sledgehammer. It's also easier to angle grind a chain that's slack and on the ground. Now, personally, I use this 11mm noose end Pragmasis chain as it's light enough to be portable, and the noose allows me to loop it around something, then attach the other end to the angle grinder resistant D-lock. That way, if they want to pick the bike up, they'll have to cut the chain, but it still can't be pushed away without then defeating the D-lock. And if you can do this at the back and use a disc lock at the front as well, you're really making it tough. Now, Pragmasis, which is a small family business in the Midlands, wouldn't really recommend this for motorcycles, as really 13mm is the best bet. But I like the portability of it. This 1.2 metre chain only costs £76.75 with the noose end, or £46.75 with the normal end. If you want a 13mm, 1.2 metres is £93.75 with a noose, or £58.75 without it. A quality chain has a careful balance of case hardening and through hardening. Good case hardening resists the initial cutting, but you don't want too much through hardening or the chain can become brittle. There are loads of brands to choose from, and if you check the reviews at bikesocial.co.uk, you'll see I've tested Squire, P-Wag, Almax, Oxford and many others. But I reckon a noose end chain is best for travelling. As another option, there are things like this Malenko Coleraine 12mm chain lock. It's got its own lock built in and proved to offer decent resistance to attack, though this 1.4 metre version has gone up in price from £66.66 when I tested it in 2020 to £120 now. There are a few like this, including some from Abus, but personally I think buying a quality D-lock and a chain is the best investment. There are lighter weight options like the Litelok Monimoto, which is 6 bundles of steel cable in a row. This rolls up quite small, it's light and it offers reasonable protection, but an angle grinder will go through it pretty quickly. It can also be cut with specialist cable cutters, but as a portable security device, if it's all you can carry, then it's worthwhile. There's a newer Litelok Calimoto, which is harder to cut, but I just find it way too unwieldy to carry, and generally cable locks tend to be less resistant to attack, so I prefer a lightweight chain which can be bundled up small and stored fairly easily, even in some seats. If you're struggling to carry a chain and lock, the £150 BikeTrac grab bag and chain comes with a good quality chain, the Abus XS67 lock, a reminder lanyard and a strap to tie the waterproof roll bag to your seat. It's even got a pair of gloves if you're worried about getting grubby. This is a brilliant portable solution, and one I've used a few times when I'm travelling without any luggage space. Now, before we get into diamond disc attacks, I want to stress that you should just invest in good security, then get on with enjoying your bike. And Calimoto, the sponsor of this video, is a superb way to do that. For many years, I've recommended Calimoto as a great navigation app, but when they got in touch and suggested doing a promotional segment a couple of months back, I figured it was a good way to help pay for some of the big stuff I've got coming up without compromising my integrity. Calimoto really did change the way I ride thanks to its brilliant algorithm. If I have a free afternoon, I like to open the app, set a round trip of say 100 miles or so, then I just let it do its thing. You can tell it what direction you want to head and you can reshape the route, but I've honestly discovered so many fantastic roads, even quite close to where I live, that this is one of my favourite ways to get around. You can use it for destinations too. Those rides will usually take a fair bit longer than if you're using just Google Maps, but I can pretty much guarantee they'll be a lot more fun. You can really easily plan routes in as much or as little detail as you want on your phone, a tablet, or on the web-based app on a Mac or PC, and it's always proven way better than anything even Garmin's adventurous routing or TomTom's winding routes can do. But don't take my word for it. You can try a full version for free using the link in the description. If you don't like it, just cancel the subscription and you'll not be charged. Or there's a link to subscribe with 10% off. But whichever you use, I opted not to get any affiliate payment from it. So it really doesn't make any difference to me whether you go for it or not. If you love exploring back roads, I reckon you should give it a go, as I've never recommended anything I didn't completely believe in myself. Try it and let me know what you think. Now, I've been testing locks with diamond discs for a long time now, and to start with, they were one of those things that I didn't publicise, as yes, they can be more effective than abrasive discs on some locks. All the testing I do is based on typical UK crimes, and being a member of the International Association of Auto Theft Investigators and the Motorcycle Crime Reduction Group, I get to speak with police forces around the country as well as the security manufacturers. Now, I think that, like ethical hackers, I guess, where potential issues are found, there's a more important responsibility to work with the industry to address them before going for clicks on content. That's why I don't show every attack or all of them in full, especially as I've got the time and resource to keep attacking a lock until I find the best way to beat it. I'll rate that lock based on the quickest attack, but not always say exactly how I got there. Anyway, diamond discs designed for metal cutting can cut most locks without wearing out, and they can chew through some more quickly than abrasive discs, but they definitely aren't a one-stop solution for thieves. Diamond discs tend to take a lot longer to cut hardened steel than abrasive discs, even if you have to take into account the disc change. They can speed up the cutting of angle grinder resistant locks, but that depends on the lock, as they all use different materials. What I will say is that of the angle grinder resistant D-locks, the Hiplok DX1000 currently has the best resistance to diamond disc attacks. Now, I'd never normally show a lock test in full. When I'm cutting locks for testing, I'm in ideal conditions. I can lean on things, I can have multiple attempts. And sometimes if you show it, it can seem like it's a bit fast. It can be surprisingly quick to cut a lock if you're doing everything perfectly right and you've got charged batteries or mains grinder, fresh discs. But this one took so long with a diamond disc, I was really surprised by it. So the grinder's starting to slow down, the battery's starting to go, it's starting to stall. I'm not putting overpressure on. Over all the years I've been doing this, I've kind of got to know the pressure I can put on to get the fastest cut, which is why everything I'm doing is comparing. It's not saying this is how long it will take in the field or in a real life attack. It's so that I can say this lock is better or worse than this lock, and to give them some kind of ranking. And this is of course just one cut. To get it off the wheel does need 2 cuts. But remember, the typical theft is opportunistic. So while they might well be carrying an angle grinder, they don't tend to have a selection of cutting discs on hand to choose from based on what they're facing. Abrasive discs are still the quickest way to get through most motorcycle security, and while diamond discs can speed things up, that's far from always being the case. The point is, anything can be beaten, but it all makes a massive difference. And be clever with your security. Use a combination of devices and your bike will be a lot harder to steal than the one next to you owned by someone who doesn't believe locks matter. An angle grinder attack is pretty noisy, but a screaming alarm helps too. Sure, they might get ignored, but they also might put off a thief, or they might cause someone to call the police, or you might hear it. I do want to say here though that your life is worth more than any bike. Being the victim of crime is statistically unlikely, but don't put yourself at risk to save your bike from theft. Anyway, if your bike comes with an alarm, use it. If it doesn't, installing one can be pretty easy, and they have come a long way since the old days of them going off randomly or just packing up altogether. I've used the Datool Evo alarm for several years. It just needs power, but you can add a seat switch, and it has a warning LED if you want it. It's loud, and it only costs £115. If you have a tracker, put the alarm well away from it, so if a thief tries to get at the alarm to silence it, they won't find the tracker. The only thing I don't like about this alarm is that it doesn't have a backup battery, so once power is cut, it stops. But it's a really valuable initial "get the f*** off my bike" warning, and could put a potential thief off. Most modern, larger capacity bikes come with an immobiliser as standard, but they don't stop it being pushed away. And unfortunately, bypasses can often be found pretty easily, which can be installed later. You can get aftermarket immobilisers that can cut the ignition circuit when they're triggered, so they're potentially useful for smaller bikes that might be more likely to be used for joyriding. But of course, any immobiliser will, like the factory fit one, only work at the point of theft, not once it's taken away and the thief has time to work on it, or if the bike's been stolen to strip for parts. A decent mechanical lock should be your first line of defence, really. I mentioned covers already, but if you have space to carry one, they really can be useful in reducing the risk of theft. If you leave your bike outside at home, definitely make sure you get one too. Oxford has a huge range and you'll find them in most dealers from about 25 quid. Datatag, Selector DNA, Smart Water, Alpha Dot, Datool DNA, Retainer Mark, they might deter a thief, as it means a lot of the parts of the bike can be identified and linked to the owner. But it will depend who's stealing it and for what purpose. Permanently marking areas of the bike and using the microdots that are carried in a UV glue can mean when a part's found or sold on, it can be traced back to the original owner. Honestly, I wouldn't say they're a particularly strong theft deterrent compared to what we're covering here, but they are really important. I'd urge everyone to use them and keep them updated with your details. For a start, they can act as a secondary security device on some insurance policies, but most importantly, and I can't stress this enough, they can have a long-term impact on motorcycle theft. Chop shops and criminal gangs have been shut down thanks to vehicle marking, and when that happens, fewer bikes get stolen, which could mean yours. It's like paying your security forward. Right, obviously a tracker won't stop your bike being stolen, but they can mean you get it back quickly, often within an hour with the monitored systems like those I've tested by BikeTrac and Datool. Thieves could use jammers, but they're rare, and especially as bikes are typically pushed away, then left for a while, the chances are you'll get it back quickly. Also, new legislation is coming in very soon that will make it a lot easier to prosecute anyone caught with electronic security bypasses. Check out the full guide to trackers at Bike Social. I'll put a link in the description, or just Google best motorcycle tracker and look for the Bennett's logo. But as a very brief overview of all the ones I've tested, BikeTrac and Datool are currently the best options, and they're both Thatcham approved, which means insurers should recognise them. And that approval also means they have to have a backup battery, be professionally fitted, and have a secure operating centre that will liaise with the police if your bike's stolen. And BikeTrac has RF detection built in, which isn't usually needed, but can help find a bike if GPS isn't accurate enough, or if it's in a block of flats, for instance. It also has a partnership with Securitas, which can get someone out to your bike in the event that the police are unavailable. And Datool tended to be a little more accurate with its GPS location in my testing, but the main thing I like with Datool is that they're category S5 trackers, which means they have a rider present fob. S7 trackers like BikeTrac don't have this, and while they don't make a big difference to the security on bikes, they are really helpful to stop you getting false alarms when you move it, bout or wash it. Both systems cost around £350 or so fitted and around £100 a year for the subscription, because they have a 24/7 monitoring team that will call you if they see any dodgy movement in the bike. If you confirm it's been taken, they'll keep monitoring it while you call the police, get a crime number, and pass that on to the tracking company, and they'll liaise directly with officers. There's also BikeTrac Lite, which is another Thatcham accredited S7 tracker, but this one is slightly pared down, and you won't get a call if your bike's stolen. Instead, you'll get a push notification on your phone that there's movement. Then, if the bike's been stolen, you call the monitoring centre, and they'll then take over and can liaise with the police. And this one's 200 quid plus fitting and £60 a year for the subscription. And the full fat BikeTrac definitely has some real advantages, but this one is a bit cheaper. But what about things like Monimoto? Now, this isn't a professionally fitted system and it doesn't have a monitoring team behind it, so it won't be formally recognised by insurers. But I've tested the original one, Monimoto 7 and Monimoto 9. Now, Monimoto's got a lot more accurate over time, and it calls you if the bike's moved and you're not near it with the fob. It costs £150 plus £36 a year, and it's definitely the best self-fit tracker I've tested, but like any of them, do not put it under the seat. Hide it properly, as the first thing most thieves do is rip the seat off and look for a tracker. If they find it, it'll be gone. Some people use Apple AirTags, and there's a new Android one coming out that works with Google's Find My Device app, like Chipolo 1 Point. And these can work, but bear in mind that anti-stalking measures make them much less effective. They can alert a thief that there's a tracker near them, they can be set to make a noise to help them find them, and they can even stop or limit tracking when they're at a thief's home. So they're not perfect. But a bike taken and left in the street, which is typical, could still be found. Personally, I wouldn't rely on them for a motorbike. I've tested a lot of trackers, including the Streetwise one from Aldi and SysApp, so do check the written reports if you want to know more. Good trackers do work, and every police officer I've spoken to has confirmed that they will attend a live tracker theft unless there's a major incident on.
Hi, my name's Gareth Berry, Sergeant 4000 from Merseyside Police, and I'm currently in charge of the bike team within Merseyside. If you've got a tracker fitted, it almost makes it a little bit easier for the police to be able to do something, because we've got some kind of solid evidence to go on then. We can get a track back from either the company or a live tracking, and it'll give us the fact that a bike's either moving or it's been stored somewhere. And generally, if we've got the bike on the move and we can get it housed somewhere, it means that we can get somebody with it as well, which is a lot more important to us, because we've actually got something, not just the bike back, but we've got someone to show for it as well, which hopefully in the future will prevent that person from re-offending as well.
And so I'm assuming it's a lot easier to work with a secure operating centre like a BikeTrac and Datool, you know, that are used to working with the police. But say a member of the public's got even an Apple AirTag. Is that helpful to you? Is that something that you can respond with?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something as simple as an AirTag or any kind of tracking device you can get these days on the internet. If you've got a live track on something, you contact the police, then we can either work with yourselves or you can pass us your details, and we'll be able to follow where that AirTag is, whether that's in the bike or some equipment on your bike. We'll be able to do that. There's obviously different tracking things. The AirTags or similar things like that, they're more like your home monitoring ones. However, there are professional ones that can be installed. Quite often they're a lot more difficult for anybody who's taken a bike to find, because they don't necessarily show up if you're looking for them, or they can certainly be secreted in different places on the bike, which are a lot more difficult to get into and remove. Obviously, the professional companies, they work 24 hours a day, so there will be helplines there that anyone who purchased them from can contact and ultimately pass the information over to the police.
A lot of the locks we've covered already work great at home, but you can also use much heavier duty kit if you don't have to lug it about. You can use more of it too. I met a great guy at Motorcycle Live last year who showed me this pic of his security setup. That's proper serious. Now, you're proud of your bike, but putting signs up saying bike parking only or having bike related stuff outside, or even my other cars and motorcycle stickers in your car might be enough to get someone sniffing around. If you've got a garage, keep the door shut. When you wash your bike, try to do it out of sight. And if you use apps that let you share your rides, be very careful with them, as they can share, in some cases, far too much location data and personal information. If you've got a house alarm, make sure you wire it up to your garage or shed, and things like Ring doorbells and Blink cameras can be good, though remember that some of them only save recordings if you pay the subscription. If you keep your bike on your property, you can use a ground anchor, which makes a massive difference as you can tether your bike. The Pragmasis Torque Maxi is the best anchor I've used. It's only 60 quid, it's easy to fit, and it will take a 22mm chain. If you want one even bigger, there's the Mega version at 70 quid. Now, an anchor only needs to be as tough as a chain, and this is a 22mm hardened steel shackle, but what's really important is that it's a closed loop, so to beat it needs 2 cuts. Now look at this Abus WBA100 anchor, which costs about 80 quid. I'm using a quality steel diamond cutting disc here, but the issue is the design. It's that this one cut means it's defeated. That's a really poor design, so always check for things like that when you're buying. Now, I said before about diamond discs not being as effective as some people reckon. Watch now as I try again with an abrasive disc. A lot easier than the diamond disc. Now, both of these cuts were quick, but remember, I'm in ideal conditions with a fully charged battery and no difficulty getting access to attack it. And these Pragmasis ones sit low to the ground, and I like them because they'll take a big chain and they're great value. If you need to fit an anchor in block paving, slabs or even gravel, look at a bury-in one. Pragmasis does the sub-major. There's the big boy from Insight Security, the Y anchor, or this one from the Anchorman. All of them work great, but of course check the size of the chain you'll be using them with. Burying an anchor is more of a hassle, but Andy McKay, the Anchorman, does offer a fitting service. He's also come up with some genius solutions like this planter anchor, which looks nice, but actually weighs over 220 kilos and is rock solid under that decorative wood finish. Brilliant if you can't dig up the garden and don't have a garage. He even found a way to fit a ground anchor inside one of those bubble things for long-term bike storage. Sounds easy until you remember the bubble has to be airtight and the anchor has to be fixed securely into the ground. I'll leave a link to his website in the description. I only met him once, but he's a top bloke if you need some help with anchoring any bike anywhere. If you live in rented accommodation, fitting an anchor can be more tricky, especially as they're such a sod to remove, but Pragmasis makes the double doofer for £100. Now this is genius because you can actually take it out, leaving only the 4 fixing holes to fill. And of course that might sound about as much use as a chocolate teapot, but it's impossible to get at the bolts when the chain's fitted. Proper clever design, and Steve here at Bike Social had one in his old house, knowing he'd be moving after a while. Then he took it with him to his new home. The only disadvantage with this is that it can't take more than a 19mm chain, but that's still hefty. If you have an angle grinder resistant D-lock, consider the Hiplok AX1000 and the A1000 anchors. These use the same construction as the Hiplok DX1000, so offer great resistance to attack. The AX has this arm that swings and rotates, or the A is just the base. There's 8 expanding bolts holding them to the ground, so they can't be pried or levered out. The A1000 needs a very careful positioning though, and is more suitable really for push bikes. You still have to take your time finding the right spot to fit the AX1000, but the arm, combined with the DX1000 D-lock, makes a great home and away security setup. Yeah, I've got it on the front wheel at the moment, but this will fit a lot of back wheels too. Really, getting either locked wheel out isn't a quick job in a theft, and it makes the bike a lot harder to move, so it's not really happening. Some will say the thieves might bring a spare wheel, but they'd have to know what they're targeting and have the tools. Also, some rear wheels are far easier to remove than the front. When you fit an anchor, obviously make sure you can get your chain or lock through it, but make it as hard to access as possible once the bike's in place. Make it difficult to reach, and if it's near the door, you might even have it fitted in such a way that it can only be attacked with the door open, so the thieves can't hide inside while they work. You can go really heavy duty with chains at home, and the more the merrier. The thicker, the better. I'd recommend 16mm as a minimum, and while nothing will stop a determined thief, they do take time. In this case, it was sent to me long enough to stop the thieves. 22mm chains are pretty common now, and Oxford's Beast is very good, putting up a great fight. And this is the Pragmasis 22mm chain, but they've now gone up to an even thicker 25mm. Expect to pay about £400 or so for a quality heavy duty chain and lock, but remember it's an investment that should last you a lifetime. Now I've tested some great chains and locks from Squire too, and of course their padlocks are awesome, which are made in the UK and really high quality. I've also tested Abus, Almax, P-Wag and many others, so check the written reviews at Bike Social for more info. A chain will usually go through the wheel, but through the frame is even better. This is the Pragmasis Super Duper Anti-Pinch Pin, and yes, I'm conscious I'm saying Pragmasis a lot, but they have a very good range, and in all the stuff I've tested, they've consistently done really well. It's another great design and has a tungsten carbide insert to make it even harder to cut. This one costs £180, but there are smaller versions down to £60. It's through the wheel and swing arm here, but some people use them to go through gaps in the frame or engine. For locking with a chain, this is top tier stuff. This one's got the excellent Squire SS80 CS padlock on it. There is one compatible with the Abloy as well. Oh yeah, don't be tempted by commercial or cheap chains as they might not be suitably hardened. I mentioned Sold Secure earlier, but their website is really useful. Just go to soldsecure.com and you can quickly type in the name of a brand or product you want to check. I've seen the logo used on some websites, but they're not products that are actually registered with Sold Secure. In some cases they might have been in the past, but products have to be tested yearly to carry the certification. And it costs brands a lot to have their kit tested by Sold Secure, but in chains especially, the steel used and the hardening process has to be consistent. So it's your promise that what you're buying will do what it's claimed to. So before you buy any lock, check on soldsecure.com that it's really what it promises to be. Locking your bike up in a garage is obviously the best bet, but the average up and over door is fairly easy to peel open. If you can lock it from the inside, then do that, but otherwise get yourself some extra security, like these ASEC AS 1997s, which are only 25 quid. You can get things like these garage door defenders, they're good, but personally I'm not a big fan. They kind of shout, look, there's something worth having in here. Now Bennett's counts locked metal sheds, shipping containers and wooden sheds on a concrete base as garaged, which can be a big help to your insurance. And we set this up a few years back as getting your bike locked away out of sight does make a big difference. Of course, if you have tools like angle grinders and stuff, don't keep them in the same place as the bike. It's not true that the police don't care about motorcycle theft. A while back, I met some of the officers behind the Met's Operation Venice. You can see that video up here, but there was a lot we couldn't show. The main thing to understand is that reporting motorcycle crime is really important as it helps officers build the intelligence that, sometimes over a very long time, leads to a prosecution. In many cases, the criminals might well be known, but the evidence needs to be there for a solid conviction. Police won't always be able to come out to the scene of a stolen bike, but they need to know about it. Sadly, the fact is that in many cases there's just a hole where the bike used to be, which won't prove anything. And if the bike's found, fingerprinting it isn't always much value. It's easy to claim to have just touched it or sat on it. It's not the same as a car where there's no reason for the accused to be inside it. Anyway, remember this gang that was filmed in Soho trying to steal a Ducati? That gets shared over and over again, but nobody except us seemed to have shared the fact that they were caught and they got more than 20 years between them. Bike thefts are often part of or fund other crimes, including armed robbery, drugs and people trafficking. I talked to Sergeant Gareth Berry from Merseyside Police about bike crime in the area.
In Merseyside, we do have some antisocial behaviour involving motorcycles, which comes under the Operation Brookdale tag. We've done a lot of work over the years in relation to Operation Brookdale to try and reduce the number of motorbikes which have been stolen and also being used in an antisocial manner. We've got a number of different tactics that we can use that involves vehicles, motorbikes, helicopter and also drones as well. Obviously we've got your normal traffic cars, which we can use those in a pursuit capability. All the traffic cars are equipped with different stop stick or stinger devices which allow us to be able to puncture the tyres on motorcycles. We also have our own fleet of motorcycles both on-road and off-road, so if motorcycles that we are following or pursuing go off-road, we can follow those into the park areas and recover those and the rest of the people who are causing the antisocial behaviour. We also have as well fitted on our motorbikes, we have smaller stop sticks we can put in the panniers of the bike, so if a motorbike does go into a park we can quickly deploy those across all the different entrances and exits, and we work in close partnership with the vehicles, with the helicopter or the plane if those are up, and also our own drone team to be able to identify exactly where in a location the motorbikes are and how best we can tackle and detain the offenders and also recover the motorbikes.
It's not the first time I've met officers in Merseyside. You can see another video I did with Sergeant Dave York a few years ago up here. Merseyside Police has a pretty unique challenge because of the TT. Riders from all over the country and overseas often stay here before heading off to the Isle of Man. Constable Richards is one of the team involved in protecting them.
Hi, I'm Constable Richards and I'm an officer within the City Centre team in Liverpool City Centre. One of my roles within the City Centre team is being a part of Operation Needle. Now, Operation Needle is Merseyside Police's response to the massive influx of motorcyclists and their bikes that come into the city during the Isle of Man TT period. It's estimated that the City Centre plays host to at least 6,000 riders over this time, coming from across the UK and Europe. This brings a lot of people to our city who aren't used to the surroundings and they're in an unfamiliar place, and they may come from other locations where motorcycle crime isn't as big of a concern for them. Unfortunately, this also brings in opportunistic criminals who are very attracted to the area during that time because of an abundance of high value and high performance bikes in the area.
So last year you were obviously working in Eagle. What kind of things did you do to prepare people who came in?
What we'll do preparing is in the lead up to the races, and as people are starting to make their plans to come into the city, we launch a campaign on our social media channels, and we spread awareness about the inherent risks with having so many bikes in one area, and we ensure that we're basically telling people to, when you come in, look after your bike, and we provide general advice around how it can be done. So one of the main things we do is we liaise with a lot of the local car parks around the docks, because this becomes a main transit hub over to the Isle of Man. We'll have dedicated car parks and agreements with them, and they'll segregate off floors so that just bikes can be stored on that floor. We'll also liaise with local hotels in the area that the riders might be staying in. And last year, for instance, we were able to provide bike locks to the hotels, and any riders that were staying in the hotels and storing the motorbike were able to rent those bike locks with a deposit. And it was just that added bit of security, you know, if people had come from an area and motorbike security hadn't been at the forefront of their mind. We have daily briefings around Operation Needle that I've been a part of, where all relevant intelligence will be shared around any information that might be going on, any nominals of note within the city that are possibly linked to bike theft offences or have been charged with similar offences before. Officers on the ground and PCSOs become familiar with the faces and are able to identify them, and it leads to a very proactive and disruptive style of policing in order to prevent the offences taking place in the first place.
The Merseyside Police massively reduced bike thefts around the TT, but a couple did still slip through last year. But there's some good news in there too.
Unfortunately, we can't be everywhere. However, one of the good news stories, certainly from last year, is that we were able to identify that there's a couple of offenders trying to steal some bikes in the city centre. They were monitored on CCTV. Our response teams made quickly down there. Unfortunately, the offenders made off on this occasion. However, we were able to recover 2 bikes that had just been stolen. We weren't sure at the time whose bikes they were, so we took the bikes to one of our recovery compounds. Once we found out whose bikes they were, those members of the public who were from Spain had already gone over to the Isle of Man. But because we've got contacts in the Isle of Man as well, we'll be able to make contact with them, and working with the recovery garage, working with the steam packet ferry, we'll be able to bring the bikes back down to the pier head, get them on the next ferry and get them back over to the Isle of Man. So the 2 people who had the bikes stolen were able to use the bikes on the Isle of Man, which was a brilliant result for the police, brilliant result for the people who own the bikes, and it was a really good news story showing that everyone involved with the Isle of Man worked together, pulled together, and we'll be able to get the bikes back to the 2 riders.
I've met officers from the Met, West Midlands Police, Merseyside, Northamptonshire, and others that are really dedicated to tackling motorcycle crime. The thing is, the police have limited resource and unlimited demand, but there is a National Vehicle Crime Working Group linking them all together.
I'm Superintendent Matthew Moskrup. I'm the lead for vehicle crime for Merseyside Police. And I also support Assistant Chief Constable Jenny Sims, who manages vehicle crime and the police response to it across the country. In Merseyside, we find that the theft of motorcycles is very localised. There are different parts of Merseyside where they are popular, particularly among criminals who will use them for joyriding or to support their other activity, whether that's for drug dealers or other criminal activity. So we find that when we do target these criminals, we are actually having a big impact on the vehicle crime, the theft of the motorbikes as well. We have had significant reductions in vehicle crime over the last year, pretty much a 60% reduction comparing the first quarter of the year with the last quarter. We'll look to build on that, and hopefully we'll have a good year ahead. Assistant Chief Constable Jenny Sims chairs the National Vehicle Crime Working Group, and that brings together police, government and industry, different partners, to improve our response to vehicle crime, to reduce vehicle crime and have an impact. So I work with that group, and part of that is working with subgroups. Those subgroups include the Motorcycle Crime Reduction Group, which is a long-standing organisation which brings together the motorcycle industry, rider groups, policing and other people to understand what's going on, to develop activities, to target that, and hopefully ultimately reduce the theft of motorbikes and bring the offenders to justice. The key thing when you're at home, if the bike can be out of sight, if you're fortunate enough to have a garage or a shed that you can secure, particularly one which is alarmed, that's best. We understand not everyone has that. If your vehicle is out and about, a cover is very effective, but the main thing is to secure your bike. So use a ground anchor, use a good approved chain for securing it, use disc locks, but make sure you secure that vehicle. And if you are using the chains, don't have them lying on the ground, have them off the ground. So lock your bike, cover it, and preferably leave it somewhere where you can keep an eye on it, or other people can keep an eye on it, or it's on CCTV.
If you're taking steps to protect your bike, then you might well expect a discount on your insurance policy, but it's not quite that simple. The first issue is that not all security devices are on the list displayed by insurance brokers and price comparison sites. In an ideal world, everything certified to a minimum requirement by Thatcham or Sold Secure will be on a central database. And that is, to some extent, possible with a list that's sent out to all motorcycle insurance providers by a company called Polaris. The problem is that this list can take a long while to filter through, so some certified devices might not always appear on all insurance broker and price comparison websites. Still, it's well worth knowing that if you can't find the lock you're using on the security device list, you might see an option like unknown mechanical device, which could help when buying a policy. It's what I select, as I tend to be using different products all the time. In some cases, some OEM immobilisers aren't Thatcham approved, so aren't on the list, but you could see if unknown immobiliser is available. For uncertified trackers, like Monimoto, you might find an other tracking device option is worth using. Independent certification is important as it gives some reassurance of quality and performance, so I always recommend that you look for locks that have been through Sold Secure or electronic devices with Thatcham accreditation, but other kit can work well too, as we've seen, so the unknown options are worth being aware of. If you're in any doubt, call your insurance provider, but whether you use a specified device or an unknown one, it's impossible for me to say with any confidence what discount they might generate on an insurance policy, as there are so many variables at play, and they can all influence the policy price. That's why those conversations on social media of which insurance is cheapest can be so meaningless. In some cases, using secondary security will be the only way some insurers will quote for a specific rider and their circumstances, while in other cases it might make no difference at all. To cut a long and very complex story short, I did some research a while back using our customer data, and it indicated that even a basic disc lock could make your bike 3 times less likely to be stolen. And think about that, 3 times less likely to have your bike pinched just by popping a disc lock on. The data also showed that fewer than 1 in 1,000 bikes were stolen from riders who said they used heavy duty security, like thick chains. Now that was less than the ratio of cars stolen, so looking up really is worth it. The most important thing to take away from all this is that you shouldn't buy motorcycle security just to get a discount on your insurance. Buy it to significantly reduce the chances of suffering the heartache and hassle of having your bike pinched, and also to help protect your no claims discount and future policy prices. Buy the best security you can afford, use it, then stop worrying and get on with enjoying your bike.